I wondered if you could tell us why you wanted to do this interview.
I wanted to do this interview mostly for me, but at the same time for other kids, because I did not have a nice experience at all. And I would never want anyone else to be treated the same. I'm so sorry, but it's so difficult.
Bedfordshire Police, how can I help?
Bedfordshire Police, how can I help?
Claudia's story takes our series about unregulated homes for children in care full circle, back to Luton.
Yeah, this is the address here.
And a home we first visited with Bedfordshire Police last spring, when these PCs answered a call out about a teenager who'd gone missing from this unregulated home. We weren't allowed to film inside.
Guys, they're not happy for you to come in at the moment.
We now have a better idea why that might have been. Klaudia lived here for a few months 4 years ago when she was 17. Back then too, she says the police were frequent visitors. Why were they called so often?
Arguments, house getting smashed up, arguments with the staff, violence. A few times I saw weapons in the house. I felt really intimidated all the time. I was one of the only girls in the house. Some of them were convicted of carrying drugs and violence and things like that.
It's been almost a year since we first began our investigation into homes like the one where Klaudia lived. They're called supported accommodation and they're run by different operators across the country. The more we've dug, the more failings we've uncovered. Stories of violence, exploitation and neglect, and a dereliction of duty by some of those in charge of teenagers in care. More and more councils are using these homes. Every night in England, 6,000 kids in care are living in one. They're aimed at over 16s, with support staff expected to help them transition to independence. But unlike standard children's homes, they're not regulated. During our series, police chiefs have described shocking violence carried out by young people in these homes.
We know that we have had children placed from London into our own homes from opposing gangs, and they have stabbed each other in the home.
We've heard about other younger children in care dumped in homes that expose them to criminality by other older kids living with them.
At 15, you might be in care with an 18-year-old boy who's been arrested for some kind of sinister things, or he's affiliated with county lines, drugs. At 15, 18, you're easily groomed, aren't you? You're easy pickings.
We've even heard the tragic story of a teenager killed by another violent resident.
He stabbed him multiple times. I think it was about 8 to 11 times Lance got stabbed in the back.
Tonight we hear about another unregulated home, the one where Klaudia moved to when she was in care.
I always had my room locked, but I still didn't feel like I was safe with the lock on. I was scared.
Klaudia says her home also wasn't a place of safety.
Outside it looks like a home. Inside it's like a drug house.
Klaudia was happy to take us back there until we arrived.
It feels a bit weird. I haven't been here in ages.
And when you look at it, what do you think? What memories does it bring back?
Bad.
4 other teenagers lived in this semi-detached house with Klaudia. It and the home next door were run by the same company, Cameron Support Services Limited. Residents came and went between the 2 houses. Klaudia says it was obvious that some were involved in drugs and gang crime. 2 witnesses have told us this young man, Benny Marcos, was on a curfew tag when he lived in the property with Klaudia. Newsnight can reveal that after he left the home, he was sent to prison for possessing an imitation firearm with intent to cause fear of violence. It might not be surprising that councils have violent teenagers in their care. Gang members, county lines drug dealers, kids who've already been involved with the criminal justice system. But what is deeply troubling is that those kids are being housed with others who don't have that background. Teenagers who should be being protected and instead are exposed to risk. This video shows a resident in Klaudia's home holding a machete reportedly kept on the premises by another teenager who lived there. Klaudia says she was threatened with a similar weapon.
I was in front of the house where one of the boys came at me with a machete the size of my leg. The boy ran down the road with the machete at me and my friend. The staff member pulled him back, dragged him into the house.
The teenager Klaudia says threatened them was Chavance Christian. He'd served a sentence for possession with intent to supply heroin and cocaine before he came to the home. Klaudia says the last time she saw Chavance was last year on a Channel 4 documentary. Filmed after he'd left the home, she says it shows him on the fringes of a knife attack, then fleeing the scene. He wasn't one of the attackers, but he was arrested shortly afterwards for Class A drug and firearms offences. Now he's in prison. It seems the kind of high-risk children Klaudia lived with attracted premium payments for the company that ran the home, now called Harvest Care Group. Her council, Luton Borough, stopped using it in 2017. But mainly London boroughs kept the residents and the money flowing in for Harvest Care Group owner Craig Cameron. His company received more than £4.5 million in fees between 2015 and 2019, according to figures obtained by the Open Contracting Partnership and the Spend Network for Newsnight. Invoices seen by Newsnight indicate that Mr Cameron sometimes charged fees of more than £20,000 a month per resident. Harvest Care Group also has a home in Wembley and on its website says it has one in Croydon on the outskirts of London. There is another young man who's a key player and arrived at the home after Klaudia left. Ali Meganjobi also had a criminal past. Newsnight's established that in March 2017 he was given a suspended prison sentence. He'd been convicted on 2 counts of possession with intent to supply Class B drugs. But he wasn't a resident. Despite being a convicted drug dealer, he was the support worker for one of Klaudia's friends. Newham Council told us it stopped using the home late last year after hearing that a support worker had a criminal record. Newsnight's learnt that although this type of conviction wouldn't automatically bar someone from working in a regulated children's home, in practice no manager would take that risk. But in this unregulated sector, it went unnoticed by councils for 2 years. Both Ali Meganjobi and Harvest Care Group's owner Craig Cameron declined to comment. One council told Newsnight it had had only positive feedback about the company, and a former resident told us that Craig Cameron was a good guy who helped him a lot, and that the Luton home was okay if you kept your head down. That wasn't good enough for Klaudia. What was the worst thing for you about living there?
Safety. Safety and stability. You don't have a home. You have somewhere that you are staying. So it's like you don't have a safe place. And not having a safe place is like being lost. And whenever you go for help, you don't get it. So you feel even more lost.
What is your life like now?
My life is very different now. I go to uni, I study fashion design. I just handed in my submissions. Really proud of it. So yeah, I'm joining into the community more. And yeah, trying to support other people. Like I was never supported. I'm trying to be there for others. So yeah.
We did ask to speak to a government minister about unregulated children's homes, but none were available. The Department for Education provided this statement. Children in care deserve the highest levels of support, and there are no circumstances where a child under 16 should be in inappropriate or unsafe accommodation. That is why we have already taken urgent action to ban the use of unregulated accommodation among under 16s and to bring in national standards in these settings, raising the bar for every child. I'm joined now by Anne Longfield, the Children's Commissioner for England, Paige Brookes, now 18, who was in care in her mid-teens, Chris Wilde, a care leaver who has managed a number of unregulated homes, Councillor Richard Watts from the Local Government Association, representing the councils that take children into care, and Caroline Fonjock, who runs a company providing both registered and unregulated placements. Welcome, everybody. And Paige, I wanted to start with you, just picking up on what Klaudia said at the end of that film about feeling lost, being lost from having no home. Is that how it felt to you?
I think to a certain extent that's how it feels for every young person in and out of care. I mean, in care and supported accommodation. I mean, it's so isolating. I mean, there's such a lack of communication. It's loneliness. I think the main thing is loneliness. And I feel like in care especially, that's when you're most vulnerable and you need people the most. And I feel like that's when you were left most on your own.
And this discussion isn't about one particular setting. It's obviously about the kind of broader issues. But Anne Longfield, we were astonished when we started to look into this and started to unpick what was happening. Did it shock you too?
It did, to some extent. I think it always shocks when you hear the stories we've heard and see the examples and the terrible tragedies. But, I mean, real credit to you and the team here for really seeing that and sticking with it. I think it has made a big difference. But, you know, these are the most vulnerable kids. These are 6,000 of the most vulnerable children in this country who are living this evening, staying this evening in some of those places where none of us would want our own children of 16 or 17 to be. And that can't be right. We wouldn't accept it for our own children, and we shouldn't for children in care. So I welcome the government's involvement in this area, somewhat long overdue, but it has to be the first step on many steps, and we have to absolutely transform the kind of opportunities and kind of safety that we offer those children who need and rely on the state for help.
Richard, what we've heard time and time again through this series of the vast amounts of money that councils are paying, £20,000, more than £20,000 per child per month for some children, for poor quality care. Why can't you always get good quality care for that huge amount of taxpayers' money?
It would be fantastic if it was available, but the real problem here for facing many councils is the enormous shortage of appropriate placements for our young people. I mean, the stories we've heard this evening are horrific. However, I know of social workers who tried to phone 200 different providers trying to find a place for a child in care to sleep. And when it gets to 9 o'clock on a Friday night and the child still hasn't been placed yet, then councils have a basic legal duty to find somewhere. So the real problem is the increasing number of kids coming into care and the decreasing number of places that councils can put them in, and that's what's driving some of the crisis.
And Chris Wilde, the councils are the corporate parents.
Yes.
How do you see this? Are they doing a bad job?
Well, they're not doing a bad job, but at the same time, they're not doing the right job, and that's what's causing the problem. I mean, I approach this from a personal and professional perspective. I'm in the trenches with these young people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I have seen firsthand the detrimental effect it's having on their well-being.
Yes, Caroline Fonjock, I don't go to you as a baddie. You provide both unregulated and regulated care settings. The government has made this announcement. They've announced this review. They're going to raise standards. We know they plan to ban under-16s from being placed in these homes. Scotland already regulates that sector. Do you think regulation in England is the answer?
There's no question. As a use for under-16s has been unacceptable. We've had residential children's homes for a long time. We have all sorts of issues that we need to discuss and pull apart to make sure that we can have more placements and better placements for those children in the sector of registered children's homes. But in supported accommodation, actually, we need to all come together, all the agencies, to look at actually how we provide good quality provision that meets all of the needs, not just whether it's accommodation, whether there is good staff, but actually how we're all going to work as education, as health. And we've
recognise the sums being charged for it?
We know that within the registered children's home provision, we already have a very strong and robust regulated framework. We've got good quality standards, we've got Ofsted inspecting, and the costs are high. The most recent ICHA, Independent Children's Homes Association, are saying around £4,000 a week as an average cost for children's home placements. And there's not necessarily huge profit being made on those. In the unregulated sector, the recent report from government suggested that one child, at least one, was being paid £250 a week. Now, we have to be realistic that if we're paying that, we are not going to get good quality care.
But it seems like not getting good quality care at £20,000 a month
that's
either.
about regulation and the local authorities and those commissioning, going out, social workers visiting those homes and investigating and saying, well, it's not acceptable, that those children should not be there and they need to be removed.
And Anne Longfield, the government is now making clear under 16s shouldn't be in these homes. Do you think 16 is the right cut-off point?
Well, I don't want any children in care to be in these homes, actually. I want there to be better residential care and the proper support for children. I don't think these children, in the large extent, are able to provide support for themselves. I don't think that's the case. But I do think, we have government now saying it's going to have a care review, something, again, I really welcome. That has to look absolutely at root and branch in terms of care. And I do accept that, I'm very familiar with social workers saying that they do ring 200, 300. But knowing that, it can't be the case that we accept that as normal. It has to be something that is acted on, both locally and nationally too.
And Paige, where are you on the sort of should under 16s not be in there, should over 16s be in these places?
Personally, I feel like it's not supported accommodation that is the issue. I feel like it's the way that supported accommodation is managed. I mean, it's completely unregulated. I mean, as you've said, up to £20,000 a month is absolutely ridiculous amounts of money. They could do so much with that. And I mean, as you've said, I understand that it's not always possible to provide great care, but we shouldn't settle for a minimal. I mean, as a young person sitting here being in that position, it's completely unacceptable for any young person to go through that when there's a staff member there on minimum wage, when there's £20,000 per child being put into these places. So, I mean, to answer your question, Katie, I don't feel like it's supported accommodation that is the issue. I feel like if Ofsted was regulating this properly, I feel like if the councils were regulating this properly, and if social workers were more, proactive in getting involved in actually taking the kids, walking the kids into these placements and not just dropping them off at the doorstep, that a lot more could be done. I mean, it is doable if it's managed right, but at the minute, it's not that.
Richard, you were nodding there. What do you think of what Paige had to say?
I think that's right. I think supported accommodation is for some young people an appropriate thing for them to be in, depending on that young person's needs. It's not the kind of accommodation that's the issue. What is the issue, actually, is that where that's not the right person, often young people are therefore put in it simply because there are no other viable options available. Children's social care has faced enormous funding pressure from government. We were overspent by £3 billion last year. Councils are cutting every other service available to them in order to keep spending money on children's social care, and it's still not enough. And the real issue here actually is this sector needs a proper funding injection from the forthcoming budget and comprehensive spending review.
Are you going to get it?
We desperately need it, because if we don't, we're going to carry on hearing stories like this. If it's not in this sector, it'll be in somewhere else, because the pressure will pop up somewhere else if it's not properly managed.
And what do you think, Chris, of the announcements by the government?
Well, when I see it, I'll believe it. People like me and Paige, this is what we do every day. We see it. We see young people dying every day. We see these young people coming into semi-independent care. We see county lines. They seem getting groomed into CSE. And for me personally, it hasn't changed in 20 years. So when you say government's going to invest money into the sector, where is it? And when is it going to come? How many more children need to die?
I feel like it's not that, though. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just feel like, I know money seems to be the discussion and it always comes down to money, but no discredit to staff that do this job, but I feel like when I'm sitting next to someone like this whose heart is so clearly in this job and wants to do right by these young people, I mean, sometimes it's just that conversation, it's that communication that can be the difference between being completely isolated and completely lonely, and a knock on that door to say, do you need help to look for work today, or have your benefits been sorted out, would you like to take a walk? I mean, it's tiny little things like that that are going to make such a difference.
There's a real problem in this sector. One of the primary problems is the workforce, and actually that's a problem across registered and unregulated. But staff have to understand and they have to learn. So we've got one of our ex-residents that does some training with the staff. And actually what she points out really eloquently is it's not about whether you were reporting me missing. It's not about whether you were telling me to stay in when I wanted to go out. It's about when I got up in the morning, did you offer me a cup of tea?
I agree with
Were there flowers on the side? Was there
Basics.
a fruit bowl there?
Yeah.
It's
chocolate on the bed.
We know.
Yeah.
I'm a social worker. I came into this field because I saw this, and it was unacceptable. Back when I started doing this work, we were looking at children being placed in unsuitable accommodation, B&B. There was no support whatsoever. But actually, we get into a conflict about whether registered or unregulated should be care or support. It doesn't matter the age of the child. We keep talking about this arbitrary age of 16, and actually, Children should have a gentle transition through their age range into independence, and all of that, whether they are coming into care at 3 or they're leaving at 18 or beyond, it should be caring.
So, very quickly, because we've got no time left, sadly, how confident are all of you that in a year's time, if you came back here, things would have changed?
As long as we keep doing things like this, they will change.
I think that we're going in the right direction and there's some green shoots, but it will need a massive commitment for change. And it's not all about money, but money's important. And really, kids have got to be at the heart of this. And at the moment, it doesn't feel like they are.
Children in care are still children, that's it.
And we need all the agencies to come together. One of the things that our organisation is doing is trying to set up a conference for later this year. We would want everybody to be involved in that, because it isn't just social care on its own that can deal with this. It isn't just unregulated. It's going to need all of us together to work on it.
I agree with everything that people have said. However, there is enormous pressure on the children's social care system, and if this problem gets sorted out, other massive problems in the children's social care system get sorted out, and that comes over time, and it comes with proper and sustained investment from central government.
And Paige, last word to you. Do you think things will change in a year's time, do you think?
I've got hope that they will, for the sake of other young people like me and, you know, like that girl that was just at that house. I mean, the exact same position I've been in. If we carry on being proactive, I mean, like Newsnight's doing, if we keep bringing light to this, if everyone puts, you know, if everyone chips in, if everyone brings light and actually really tries, I feel like it will.
Thank you so much, all of you. This really matters, so thank you so much.